2006, I achieved, along with a friend, a world first. Run the entire length of the Great Wall of China in a single attempt. This was a distance of 4,200 kilometers, and I had to do it at the pace of over a marathon a day for 98 days. The likes of Professor Tim Noakes deemed it physically impossible. The ascents on their own equal the height of Mount Everest 14.8 times. The Great Wall of China traverses some of the most arduous terrain known to man. And then again, in 2008, I achieved a second world first by running the entire coastline of South Africa from Namibia to Mozambique, a distance of 3,200 kilometers. Also at the pace of a marathon a day. But for me, ladies and gentlemen, it's not so much the world first. What's way more important is the purpose, the significance behind it. These two runs accumulated enough for 150 children born with cleft palate and cleft lip disfigurements to smile for the very first time. The girl you see here, Michelle, the same girl 6 months later. But whilst running the coastline and having studied climate change for the past 15 years, I thought to myself, whilst we're putting smiles on children's faces, there's actually very little for them to smile about 15 to 20 years from now. Indeed, there's very little for most of us to smile about 15 to 20 years from now. Climate change is the most pressing issue facing our existence and indeed the existence of many species on Earth. It is a huge problem and it's very real. So when I was asked to represent South Africa in the Scott Amundsen centenary race to the South Pole in 2011-2012, I again asked myself, what's the purpose? Because for me, purpose beyond ego is vital. We live in this world full of ego. Purpose beyond ego. So I chose climate change. And Peter van Kets, my close friend, and I had a movie made called Cold Sweat, looking at the issues around climate change and the degradation of our biodiversity. Just to give you perspective, the race itself, 888 kilometers, on skis. I skied for the first time 8 weeks before the start. And you move 888 Ks, a minimum, pulling your sled for 12 hours a day, over 24 days, at an average temperature of minus 45 degrees Celsius. The high plateau of Antarctica is sterile, absolutely barren. There is zero life on the high plateau. Antarctica is known, the high plateau that is known as the highest, driest, coldest, and windiest place on Earth. And I couldn't help but feel, being there, what is our Earth going to be like 20, 30 years from now? What had happened to me is I contracted pneumonia, and if I didn't make the cutoff on day 24, I would probably have died. So I was literally in a race against time. But again, our Earth and all of us are actually in a race against time. Getting to the pole, Pete and I held up a flag for the planet. And you'll notice it says there, my school, education, education, education. But I'm not meaning here, folks, curriculum-based education. I'm meaning change your thinking. We need to teach ourselves to think differently in the many small daily choices we make in our lives. When we do that, we can look after our suburbs, our villages. And if we don't, we're not going to be able to look after the planet. But I wasn't always purpose-driven. In the late 70s, my father suffered his first stroke. He was a very successful businessman, but unfortunately he didn't have adequate insurance for his businesses and he was declared insolvent. My mother left him after 29 years, and our family was split asunder. And I experienced fear that I can't begin to explain to you. My brothers, I'm the eldest of 5, and my sister went and stayed with uncles and aunts, and me with a friend. And that fear was so bad for me that it drove me away from significance and purpose. And I only chased material wealth. I drove fancy sports cars, I wore only Armani suits, I had the best parties in Cape Town, and I thought I was Mr. Popularity. And my head was so big I couldn't get through the door. And in 1984, my worst fear became my reality, and I was declared insolvent. And folks, I lost everything. My father had suffered his second stroke. Being the eldest, he was living with me. His body was crippled, but his mind was still sharp. But his dignity was also shattered because I had to take him to the toilet and bathe him every evening. Now I didn't have a home, so I had to put him in a frail care center, and he died 2 weeks later. And then my fiancée left me. And then the ego that was here was non-existent, and I took myself off to the mountains for one sole purpose, and that was to commit suicide. And I will never, ever forget those humbling moments. The last night before I was going to climb up onto the cliff and jump off, I was lying under this blaze of stars that we are so blessed to have as our southern night skies. And it sits with me to this day how absolutely tiny I felt, insignificant and absolutely worthless. And something simple, and nature speaks to us in simple ways, happened to me. A spotted eagle owl close by in the dark hooted, as the males do. And I felt like I was going to have a heart attack, literally. I felt a pressure, a weight in my chest, that my chest was being crushed. But what was happening is nature was bringing me back to my senses. And I felt the first tear in a decade running down my face. I couldn't cry, even when I buried my dad. And I started crying like a baby, and I sobbed in that dark night of my life. And I realized in the morning the greatest truth I would ever need to muster was to go home and live a life of purpose. And I came home and I became an honorary game ranger for South African national parks. And being a game ranger, you have the wonderful opportunity to experience nature firsthand, up close and personal, and the many lessons that she shares. And the one lesson that nature insists on: if you're not an asset, you are a liability. You have no place in the system. And ladies and gentlemen, we are not exempt from that fundamental principle. Imagine for a moment a paradigm shift in our thinking, all of us. Instead of the norm with most people, how much can I get as quickly as possible, to the shift of, what is it I have to give? What is it I have to give? We change everything. The other law of nature, which I'm sure you all know anyway and all agree with, is that everything is connected. Everything is inextricably connected. 3.4 billion years of evolution. But when we break too many of these connections, we have ecosystem collapse. Our planet is currently facing the greatest mass extinction, not in the history of the planet, according to certain peer-reviewed papers, but in its history, where anything between 60 and 110,000 species are going extinct annually. Annually. Can we shift this? I believe we can. I have a huge dream, big one. And I'm sure many of you share this dream with me. I want to save the world. I want to save the world, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. It seems a daunting task: save the world, fix the mess we've made. But a daunting task when people collaborate towards a common goal, a common dream, a common purpose, collaboration towards that purpose, the seemingly impossible becomes possible. So I'm going on a big expedition. And it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to be gone for a long time. But I'm hoping we're going to stay connected. I'm going to be sailing across the ocean from Walvis Bay in Namibia to Ubatuba in Brazil. And then on foot through the Amazon jungle, over the Andes Mountains, paragliding off the Andes Mountains, and mountain biking the Atacama Desert to Chile. There, my friend Pete will be joining me. We sail the massive Pacific Ocean to the east coast of Australia. And once in Australia, mountain bikes and on foot, zero carbon emissions this expedition, the Great Simpson, Gibson and Sandy Deserts, the Indian Ocean, on foot through Madagascar, sailing into Mozambique, in Inhambane. And then on foot and on mountain bikes through Mozambique, the top end of Kruger National Park, Botswana, and finishing at Walvis Bay through the Namib Desert. But why? What's the purpose? The purpose is to connect 1 billion people around the world doing one thing for the planet. How do we do that? How do we do that? And is that possible? Absolutely, it's possible. If you take that word impossible and break it into two words, separate it after the I am, I'm possible. All of us, when we start putting back, collectively we reach a tipping point. So how do we do this practically? 20 years ago, you couldn't reach 1 billion people. You couldn't reach 500,000 even, very quickly. With social media now you can. So I've had an app designed which is going to be free for the whole world because everyone needs to get it and have accessibility to it in 2016. And it's the Dot app. And this app is not, it's just like Facebook, but it's only for the planet. So it's not about people helping people. This is about people helping planet. Because if people help planet, we help people anyway. So what is Dot all about? Many small actions making a huge difference. You don't have to go and run the Great Wall of China. You don't have to go to the South Pole. Do many small things. Take a brick, put it in your toilet system. Take a selfie, put it on the app. Every time you flush, you save a liter of water. What if 1 billion people did that? Recycle. Don't throw it away. There is no such thing as away. Recycle. Switch your lights off when you leave the room. Turn the tap off when you brush your teeth. Shower, don't bath, and we go on. And we already have thousands of dots that we can all do. At the end of the day, life is short. The planet will be here long after us. But it begs the question, in your lifetime, while we're still breathing the air that we get for free, that we take for granted every day, we have work to do. My journey continues to the end of my life, to be the greatest asset I can be to the planet. Please join me in that. Don't ask what the earth can do for you. The earth can't give anymore. Ask what you can do for the earth. Thank you very much for your time.